really boring. Anyway, thanks for that introduction, Kathy and Ann, and I will get on with it. I will get my voice, because it moved your pace up. So I just titled it a BC forest entomologist, and everybody has a favorite insect. I have many, but I love weevils, so the weevil woman's wanderings. So of course, I have to thank you for the great introduction and for the members of the Founders Award Committee that bestowed this honor on me. So Kathy and Joel and Matt and Steve and Celia. And there's a lot of people that should be before me, but I'm here. Yay. And Barbara's next. Yay. I'm so happy. But I have a lot to follow because Iro blew us all away last year with her talks. So. And of course, John Borden. I don't know. I think he always had this dream of tromping through the woods all the time and just playing with bugs. And maybe that's why he liked me. I don't know. Thanks, John. And the letter writers. I think you're all up here. And the meeting organizers. I'd list you all off, but you know who you are. Absolutely amazing venue. I think the talks this year have been better than ever. I just love Wickwick. Anyway, I can't spend my whole 30 minutes on the first slide. So I have 3 themes, pretty ordinary, for my talk. And the first one, of course, is people, the students, the mentors, all the foresters I work with, a huge slate of First Nations. I taught for 20 years at Thompson Rivers University, so I dragged those types in the field. Lots of friends and colleagues. Oh, look, there's Iro. How did you get in that photo? Anyway, the reason actually we're all here is because at some point we fell in love with insects that live in the forest, didn't we? And we thought we could learn about them, understand them, even manage them. Well, we'll see how we've done in that regard, shall we? And for me, it's gratitude. I live in the Tecumloops or Quetman territory in Kamloops, BC, or Tecumloops, and it's absolutely amazing. Oh, and there's red trees there too. There used to be. And my playground has been not only around Kamloops, but projects have taken me throughout the province. And we don't really see lines in the sand, so we share what we do. We share our fun, or as other people say, our disasters. So anyway, I'll weave my tale tonight through those main themes. And we'll start with the cartoon, shall we? So if I hear a crash, I'll know that you dropped a napkin and didn't just let a snake fall off your chair. So I'll understand totally. Or if you need to snore, go into the back corner, because I don't really approve of snoring. But just in case you haven't been reading Wikipedia lately, ramblings are circuitous, disjointed, incoherent, and long-winded. So that's what you're in for, folks. Here we go. Yeah, I'll look at my watch one more time. Here we go. So we all have to have one slide that embarrasses you. I started my life in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. That's Canada. It's home of apple orchards, cherry orchards, and the Ogopogo. And even as a young larva, I love the outdoors. I love winter and snow. And I seem to have a penchant for fast, open-eared vehicles. And I've kept that up throughout my life. So skiing and, I called that the traveling hot tub. Yes, that's one of my dogs on the back of my motorcycle. So, anyway. So I'm going to get into sort of how I got into forest entomology and what happened. So I graduated from the University of Victoria, and I took all the entomology courses they offered there from Dr. Richard Ring. And I went, okay, this is something I could dig my teeth into. But I didn't quite know what area of entomology, but Dr. Ring always took his students over on a field tour to Simon Fraser University across the ocean to the great city of Burnaby. And we went through the Center of Pest Management and this program called Master Pest Management, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this, but right now I need to earn some money. So I got hired by a company called Seacam Oceanography, and could you get me a glass of water? That'd be really nice.
It hasn't been touched. It was the empty seat.
And with a sister company called Arctic Labs up in Inuvik in the Northwest Territories. So yay, I got a job. And I sat at a microscope sifting through, they have these big dredges that they scrape along the bottom of the seafloor, because at the time in the late 1970s, early 1980s, they were building artificial islands in the Beaufort Sea where they would then put their drill rigs for oil. So it was a hub of activity in the Canadian Arctic. And well, you can imagine, if you don't sample things right, I mean, it's much like insects. They get mushed, and you have no idea of what's on the bottom. Plus the reason they were even doing this, and that I was digging through these samples, was it's prime feeding habitat for the bearded seal, which is endangered, and so, yeah, they wanted to know what they were destroying before they built the islands. Anyway, well, no, they wanted to maybe not build where it was. So one day I overheard the owners of the company saying, we really need to get divers or do it differently because we're just not getting the data we need. We'll hire these hard hat divers. There's all kinds of them up there. And then, well, they don't know what to look for, how to do it. I'm much more loudmouth and bossy now than I used to be. I was so scared of people back then, I couldn't talk to anybody. But I went, I died. And they look at me, and I think it went, ka-ching, ka-ching, she'll be really cheap. So off I went to Vancouver, got crash course in hard hat diving. They fitted me up with a dry suit from a company called Fits Right. It never fit right. I don't think they believed how long my legs were, so never fit right. And they geared me up, and for that kind of diving, you get a harness of weights, you get ankle weights, and you get, as it's called, a hard hat, surface applied air. So that's fine. I'm geared up over the side of the boat. And I dove a lot. So you get your buoyancy, you figure out the underwater video, how to collect things, how to talk, and it's like, I'm pretty good. I know how to do this. And then they throw over a roped ladder over the side of the boat. Come on out. It's hard enough in a bathing suit to climb up a roped ladder. And so they got a big yuck out of this. They hooked a hook in the top of my helmet and winched me out of it. And then they said, the guys use a motorized lift to get out of the water. So off I went to Tuktoyaktuk. And the reason I had the mosquito back there, it's true what they say of the Arctic. You step outside, and they're after you, like this squad of aliens. They're really bad. So this is the fellow Dick Heath that I was diving with. One is underwater, the other one's always tending the air and talking to you. And at the time I lived in Victoria, so we zoomed up to Inuvik, then up to Tuktoyaktuk, and that shows, the pictures are blurry, didn't take good photos back then. And then we're just standing on deck, posing. It was always chilly, great vistas, great views. And we went in various ships all through the Beaufort, sampling, diving. And I just thought I'd show you what I saw. Oh, and the crew. I don't think they knew for about 3 days that I was a female, because usually we were geared up or sleeping because we dove for a long, long time. We were underwater, it gets so shallow. But anyway, they figured out I was. Anyway, and then so they were really helpful, and they liked to identify what I brought up. So that's the picture there. And I nicknamed the soft corals Raspberry Delights. They were blind isopods. And that blue blurry picture is actually me looking up at my partner tending line. So it was just gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful up there. But the best part, we were still diving and get this on the radio. You got to end your dive, you got to come up now. So I haven't finished. Anyway, up we come. And there was ice floes coming in. Yeah, look, there's blood all over those ice floes. Get out of the water. So, do you want to go find him or her? So off we went, and about 10 minutes later, we found this beautiful creature on the ice floe. Glad I was out of the water. Yeah, so that was pretty good. But I knew that's not my career. I still like insects better. It was a grand adventure. And I got a call from a friend, a colleague that I knew at UVic. And he said, "You like bugs, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, we got an outbreak of spruce beetle and hemlock looper in Revelstoke, which is a really mountainous town in the sort of east corner of BC, somewhere around there." So I packed up my great little car, all full of stuff. Off I went to Revelstoke. Of course, it broke down halfway in a village called Chase, and I took the bus the rest of the way. I was not a student anymore, but pretty close. And there, learned the art of snowshoeing, and we got helicoptered all over the place into remote areas. There was nothing better than a roaring spruce beetle outbreak. At that time, don't throw things at me, we were doing lethal trap trees with MSMA for spruce beetle control. We weren't doing anything about hemlock looper except watching it chew through the forest. Notice how I left out anything about snowmobiling. That's the colleague that I was out with that day. I was in a worse predicament ahead of her, taking the photo. To this day, I really don't like riding on snow machines. I always get stuck. But it builds fortitude, is what I'm saying. Yeah, anyway, so I absolutely fell in love with forest entomology. Met Dave Dyer when I was working there, and David Gray, some of you may remember, past entomologists. And then again, it's typical for BC government, layoffs are coming. I was just an auxiliary, and I thought, okay, now's my chance. I'm going to go back as of you and do my MPN. And I'll just make a comment when you showed the list of the founders, Mark McGregor. I met Mark McGregor. Yay! He was such an amazing man. I don't think he thought the same of me. John Borden, in the course he taught, always had one of us sponsor a speaker to come and speak to the course. And I got Mark McGregor. So I went to the airport, picked him up, and was roaring back to SFU. Leadfoot here, and you would know, he was a sheriff or a part-time deputy or something or other. I got a speeding ticket. I got pulled over by the RCMP with a speeding ticket. But he was so gracious and really nice. Oops. Anyway, so yeah, I studied translocation of arsenic post-attack and mountain pine beetle and developed this new technique to figure it out. And you know what John instilled in me and all his students is, you publish a paper and you put everybody that was involved in it as a co-author. You help all your colleagues when they're going into the field. And we did. We always did. We were out there, and that's John, fine art of chainsawing, as he was always doing. I think that tree hung up, actually. But it was a great experience. I did actually finish my master's and started a PhD on a weevil, Pisotes terminalis, because you always get hooked when you do a master's. But along came a posting for this regional entomologist job in Kamloops, and John says, "Well, go for it." Well, you have to be an RPF. Oh, you can work on getting your RPF. That's registered professional forester. If you get the job, you can work on that while you're finishing your PhD and doing your job. I'll do it. So anyway, I got the job, yay, and moved to Kamloops, and I thought, I'll only be there a few years, so 37 and counting years later, but it's great. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's a very unique job, and Anne described a lot of it. It's fun, it's challenging, and at times frustrating, but that's the government, eh? How can you say you love every minute of your job when you're filling out a form, doing your budget? But you know, the beauty of it is, there's a forest health emergency. Go in your truck and go check something out in the woods. So we did that. And so I'm based at the Black Arrow, and all the orange arrows are where there's other forest entomologists, of which there's a few sitting here, Marnie and Celia somewhere. But when I started, they were all entomologists from John's lab, John Borden's lab. They were all guys, but I didn't realize that until 20 years after the fact, when women started to filter in. You were the only woman. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so we've had a big turnover recently, so we're getting a whole new suite of young, keen, really smarter than any of us were entomologists coming in. And if you ask any one of them, I'm really going slow here, every one of us will say a different thing about what our job is. And it shows the diversity of BC, our different insects that we work with, and also quite a bit of flexibility for a government organization to, as long as they learn to trust you to do what you have to do. And you're not always listened to, as I'll say in some of my talks. It took me over 30 years to get them to really realize that a certain suite of weevils was somewhat important. But you get the most gratifying days, for me anyway, was when I was going out with other foresters. We call them licensees, the company foresters, because they really tried to get things going. Then, of course, we grumbled that they were doing everything wrong when we were back at the ranch. But, you know, they were most appreciative of our time. So lots of training, lots of going out in the field. But also a lot of confusion. This is us on a field trip. I had to put this in because people always would make fun of, who do you work for now? So 7 name changes since I started in 1987. The worst was the last one, Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resources, and Rural Development. Thank God we're back, Ministry of Forest. Phew, anyway. So finally, some weevil stories. All Pasotes, but they're important in BC, and they're important with what I've worked with. And I mentioned I had just had barely one field season when I got this job, of course with botched experiments in the field. I think I was trying to do some kind of oviposition trial with those bags. I found this drawing I did in one of my notebooks, the other weevil. And it's really true, because everybody knew that Pasotes strobi, spruce weevil or white pine weevil, whatever you choose to call it, it made a real impact. It decimated our Sitka spruce. It was bad. This one, does it kill the tree, Lorraine? No. Well, what's it do? Well, you know, man. So nobody believed it was worth anything, but I thought it was totally fascinating. But why it was actually to my benefit to get this job and finish the PhD at the same time is because I got to do all these offshoot projects or see something else and expand on what I started, like more plots on the land base. I don't know, I've got hundreds of plots looking at pests of young pine. You discover new things, and you stay at it for years and years and years. So you don't just see a snapshot of what happens, you see what happens and how it transitions over time. Plus you have daredevils. Why isn't that other helper at the top of that climate station? We did a lot, even, you'll notice most of my photos start at 1998 because I've lost all of my photos for the first decade that I worked there. I don't know where they are. probably on a floppy disk. Anyway, yeah, a lot of help. This is our microclimatologist showing off at the top of the weather station, but we were always monitoring weather and climate and things like that, even before it was, you know, the big deal, and got some really good data. And so that first over-physician trial didn't work, so we made larger homes for our weevils, and a really keen contractor worker for me sat for hours in a day watching the diurnal, not looking at anybody, diurnal movements of and mating habits of Basotes terminalis. And plus we reared them, you know, back in the lab and got their degree day requirements. It did all the usual stuff for weevils. But again, the most fruitful were these plots. Again, yeah, it starts in 1997, but I followed them from 1985 up to now to see when a tree gets attacked by this terminal weevil, what's the end result? Other than just, oh, 10% of the trees were attacked or 20% of the trees. Well, they result in a mess like that. You know, something happens. So anyway, I figured that out. And then fast forward to more present day times, you know, the last 2 days it was hammered over and over, you know, drought, changing climate, it's warmer, heat waves. Well, we're really seeing this with young stands. One of the results of my early work with terminalis was ample growing space. Well, that was my way of saying we don't have enough density in these young stands, or heaven forbid you've gone in and spaced them or something. That's when you got really severe defects. That's when a lot of your trees got attacked. And then more recently, you know, these trees are now 35 to 45 years old, you get really severe deformation. Like if you can chip it, that was a neat field trip today. Yeah, you get a deformed tree and you'll chip it. But do you know how many hundreds of thousands of hectares, millions of hectares of pine we have in BC? I don't think we're going to chip all those trees because we can't get, you know, a 2x4 or a saw log. And, you know, it's getting warmer. And I think I've sort of told you I did a lot of things, but I did spend a lot of time in young stands, young pine stands. I had never seen this until after the more recent drought and heat events. We're promoting mixed stands post-mountain pine beetle. That's really good. Yes, you know, biodiversity. However, when you have spruce growing in mixes with lodgepole pine, and it runs out of spruce leaders to hit, it's shifting to lodgepole pine. And instead of maybe a lesser defect that terminalis would cause, Basotes strobi is doing what strobi does, causing a really severe defect. And so I looked into this and started whizzing around in this certain biogeoclimatic zone I was in, and in all those key drought years, we were getting this shifting of hosts. So I was trying to look very solemn and concerned. It's like, oh, this is so great. I mean, oh, we should rethink our management strategies. And just to follow on that drought theme years ago, that there's a lot of concern and a lot of movement on managing young stands better. Hey. But we did other things. Oh, there's John Borden again. Because where I work is so close to the big universities in the Lower Mainland and on the island, a lot of their experiments were done. So this was, it was with Stapp and Lindgren. I think it was some kind of verbenone trial. I can't remember. But they put this fluorescent powder all over pine trees. And they were tracking on that. It was kind of cool. But from an operational standpoint, as Anne had mentioned, we'd just come off of what we thought was a big mountain pine beetle outbreak in the 90s. And we thought we have to document how to do better. And I even remember talking at a WFIWC conference about these great strategies and tactics we have. But they're pretty good, actually. And it was John Borden, Les Safranek, a bunch of company foresters, a hydrologist, district staff. We got together and pounded out, at the time, a really new conceptual approach to how to manage bark beetles at a landscape level. Designate high hazard areas, incorporate hazard gradings, small single patch control, big control, because then also was the advent of actually using pheromones. You know, they were now commercially available, so we started, you know, containment and then harvesting. And to this day, many of these are embedded in our legislation, and they're tweaked every few years to update, you know, what we know and some of these great models we heard about today, how to incorporate that. So, yeah, they're good tools. They're certainly not the answer. We don't have that, but they're good tools. And, oh yeah, I mentioned we had a bit of an outbreak. I think it's mountain pine beetle. I have seen this photo so much because it's up free on our website. And it's, oh, there's the Bonaparte Plateau before. Oh, that's my picture. Why did I take that picture? Oh. Anyway, that's one of the more scenic areas near Kamloops. And so everybody was busy changing the regulations of hauling and distance and stumpage rates and where you should go next, where you shouldn't go, what to do. All the while, and having field trips, the mountain pine beetle was crashing through the forest and eating small creatures. Yeah, I made that. That was for a field trip. It was fun, crashing out of the trees. But again, I'm going back to young stands. I was familiar with young stands, and starting in about 2005, 2004, we started seeing, because of just the magnitude of beetles flying around, them going into these young stands and killing them. And I'll tell you, now you can really snore. Here's the really boring bit. In BC, you know, we have, I'll call them allotments. Companies get a cut level that they can cut, but in order, when they cut any stand, they're legally responsible for reforesting that stand. They have to go and replant it. And they're responsible for that stand until it becomes free growing. So free of pests, with ample growing space to grow. And so usually with pine, it's about 10 to 12 years. And licensees are relieved of the responsibility. And it comes back to the Crown, the government, us, whoever we are. So the reason this picture is so telltale, so licensees could harvest the dead mature pine, but that's 20-year-old pine being killed by mountain pine beetle. And there was hundreds of thousands of hectares of this age pine killed during that outbreak, which I don't know if everybody realizes. So I did this project and produced a report for our chief forester who sets the AAC, and also had to determine, oh God, how much money do I have to set aside? Because we had to literally go in and, do we bulldoze all these stands and replant them? Or do we leave them or whatever? So it was a big cost to the government because we lost those, but it also gave a real window on, okay, what can happen in the next outbreak? Because density matters. I told you I had all kinds of spacing trials out in the landscape and plots, which of course got hit by mountain pine beetle. Again, this is a 35-year-old stand, spaced, and only the controls escape mountain pine beetle. So at a young age, density is kind of the flip of pine at a mature age when you think about mountain pine beetle. But it's just beetles being beetles, because in a really dense area, they were below that kind of 10 or 12 centimeter DBH, where in the space, they were chubby. They were short, but they were chubby. So it was hit. And so, and also in production, no, those trees weren't producing a lot of beetles, but they would produce enough to infest and kill another small chubby tree. So if you're going to have an outbreak of smaller chubby trees instead of big, tall chubby trees, yeah, it's enough beetles. And this was happening throughout the forest. Anywhere, at that time we were dabbling a lot on spacing and pruning and all this stuff. And it became this mosaic of shapes on the landscape because they were honing in for these areas that were spaced where the trees were growing faster. But they were young trees, 20 to 40 years old. So that was also a good insight. And it made many researchers weep. This is a really good friend and colleague, Dr. Rita Winkler. She's a snow hydrologist. She had big watershed level hydrologic experiments looking at snow ablation in mature stands, clear cuts, and young stands, 20, 30 years old. And she came to me, mountain pine beetles attacking all my stuff. When are we gonna, can you come out and look at it? I don't know what to do. And we went out and sort of all of a sudden we were thinking, this is such a great opportunity because it's not a one-off just in her research site. This is happening throughout the province, throughout the states, everywhere. To continue, she had pre-outbreak all this good years of data of snow melt in these different stand types to look at as the trees were defoliated because of being killed and what happened. Because hydrology, as we all know, is so critical when you're harvesting a lot in your landscape. So anyway, so bad turns to good in some cases. And some of you in this room, then I thought, you got to showcase what you have in your province, beautiful BC. So you can't see all the little people in that picture, but Tim McConnell came up and Iro and a bunch of others from the US, and we chartered an aircraft and flew around looking at red trees. What else is there to do? Yeah, and Tim, well, you all know him because you live in the United States, but he was a really good aerial overview mapper, and he said, I've seen outbreaks this severe before, but I've never flown for this long and this far with nothing but red below me. So we managed to impress. I also deal with defoliators, all kinds of defoliators. From this respect, we actually can do things about it. But the thing that really got me at one point, while the mountain pine beetle outbreak was full force, we had tussock moth in outbreak mode, hemlock looper in outbreak mode, and western spruce budworm, and we were doing spray programs for at least 2 of them at the same time. But also managed to sneak in some research, and Anne helped me interpret some things and many others. And for budworm in particular, a lot, again, depended on density, and we've heard a lot about that before. Our Douglas fir forests were high graded a lot in the sort of 1930s, 1940s, and it set it up with this multi-structured, never-ending supply of food for the budworm. So we saw a lot of shifting outward. We saw also over time that the recovery period between outbreaks was getting shorter and shorter. So actually tree rings in these trees that have, even though the defoliation and the outbreak had subsided, the trees were just not recovering. Anyway, so we learned a lot during these outbreaks and more of how to manage thinnings that we're talking a lot about today. But of course, the operational, this love-hate relation of, oh God, I've got to do another spray program. It's a lot of work, but it is a lot of fun. So I got to know a lot of different aircraft types. For the most part, we use helicopter, but we brought in the biplanes from Quebec. We had the big 802s, which are usually used in firefighting. And we had this neat little, it's called a thrush. And, oh dear. Yeah, the pilot walked away. He was fine. His coffee cup was intact. And he said, I didn't put the gas cap on. And if you ever watch spray programs, it's, they're up like that. So gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. So anyway, yeah, but he parked it really well. So spraying is fun. It keeps your heart beating. And lots with tussock moth. BC actually was the first to mount a large, full-scale operational program using NPV, the virus. Yeah, and it's molasses and Orzan and virus and all kinds of stuff in the top right corner. Imre Otbos was key in sort of training me. It was still in the research mode, how to use the virus and what it could do, and evaporating the chlorine out of your water and mixing it on site and all of that. That's Peter Hall. See, photos were bad back then. And then we went into a big way. This is our tanker base in Kamloops. Bring in the tanks, 1,000-liter containers, mix your molasses and Orzan there, ship it out to the site where you bring in the expensive hired help to help you. Sorry, Ira. I have you in a lot of these photos. Now, she graciously came up, there was, what was it, low dose treatments, testing when virus had been stored for over 20 years, alternate swath treatments, all kinds of good stuff. Anyway, and just, you've all seen tussock moth. It's, you know, raining frass on you. So, yeah, we figured out a lot of things. Unfortunately, no one makes virus in Canada anymore, so we don't have it, but it works like a hot damn. It's really good. And everybody's happy at the end of a good spray day. And I said it was all about people and gratitude. Well, that guy there, Craig Murray, he's Western Aerial Applications Pilot, and I think he's done our program for about 25 years. Ballet in the sky, the way some of these people fly, if you see it, it's just like incredible. So that's the fun part of spraying. You watch them finally do all the work and the way they maneuver the aircraft. And so I'll quickly get serious again with some good entomology about feeding and foraging of entomologists. You know, early on, if you wanted to have a good field trip, good training, tour, convince a licensee that they really should do it this way, bring out the hot dogs, the hamburgers, good food. No, it's good to find a skull or a bone in the woods. And yeah, entomologists are just in there getting the food. And John Borden, the only knock against him I'll ever give is, my dogs would look at him forever, and he never gave him any of his family. just wouldn't. So yeah, you got to feed the crews, but sometimes entomologists are a bit dim-witted. Kamloops in the spring, sitting in the grass. I think a few of them had quite a few ticks on that excursion. And of course, you don't have to be out in the field. This is, I think, the WFIWC we hosted in Kelowna. Yes, anyway, so insights where science flows, you get good ideas, and you make contacts, because this is the best group there is. So one of my other forays and real passion was high elevation forests, which are struggling and not doing too well, and I talked a bit yesterday, because they're experiencing climate change more than many of our ecosystems. So over the years, I did these very, very detailed surveys. I did it once, just to sort of, I think that year we flew 75 hours in helicopters mapping and actually counting reds and grays and greens in these strips. Never thinking we'd do it again, but we plotted it so exactly when with the advent of the blue dot on your events map, we reflew all of these lines exactly. And, well, of course, mortality, it increased. Well, duh, it's 20 years later, that happens. But it was accelerating at rates far beyond what was in the literature, what people thought it would do. So, I mean, it was ramping up really high levels of mortality. And it's a tiring job, all that flying, so, you know, you stop at the Tim Hortons on top of a glacier. And, or when you're refueling, the help that I have, I tell you, snoozing all the time. Anyway, great fun, colleagues I worked with. But again, what paid off, in, 100 times over, were putting installations on the ground, these big, large-scale plots, all through this forest type, where you could follow from attack through to losing the needles, checking and cracking, and falling on the ground. Spatial attack, other creatures attacking these trees, every aspect of it, flight time, predators, parasites. They're a wealth of knowledge, plus you get armies of people up in these forests. It's really fun. And there's a weevil. I knew it. My last weevil story. Get to the end. Phasodius steraculus. I combed the literature trying to find something about it, and really, the only thing written I could find is in association with eastern spruce budworm in the eastern Canada, eastern states, that again, the trees were killed by budworm and this weevil would infest, blah, blah, blah. And I'd seen it, well, as early as your work, Kathy, with Drycetes. It was there once in a while. I'd see it in the plots, and then again, we had these drought years, and more, and then one day, I saw these weevils mass attacking trees, like the whole bowl covered, well, I shouldn't have been watching and filming, but yeah, and it was amazing. So I did a little study of, life history and biology and everything, and the more you look, the more they're there. Because they sometimes make the diagnostic chip cocoon in the wood, but not always. Often they're just in the phloem. So their galleries disappear almost instantly. So you don't know that they were under the tree, because in our plots we had so many dead unknown. And you hate that, when this tree, it's tagged, well, what killed it? Well, most of the time, it was that critter. So in conclusion, because I heard some snoring, I hate to say, yeah, this is the hard part. Yeah, we lost a lot of people in BC, well, over the years, but this year in particular, so. But also tons of retirements. I can only fit 2 on a slide, but lots of retirements. These are BC people. You don't know them. Well, some of you do. Art Stock and Leo Rankin. And Art receiving a wonderful WFIWC thing that I so wanted to keep, but I got at the silent auction for him for his retirement. You could make another one. Anyway. And of course, we miss the bark beetles, but students who just get out there and get dirty and then just fall in love with entomology, that makes it all worthwhile. And I've learned in my old age that you get your technician to drive the snow machine when you're bringing in gear, and you just hop right on the back. And then you get there. And I'm all about safety gear, clothing. Oh, that's a dog. Anyway, yeah, and good friends and colleagues, and we actually mapped during COVID, and so these are the masked marauders up flying and just working in the field, and sort of I've embraced technology a lot, but for those of you that don't know, we didn't always have iPhones, and we used lab notes. We had good pink GPS systems. It's called a large balloon filled with helium that we'd walk to the corner of our spray box and put. Yeah, and of course, what do you call that? Google thing. When you want to learn about spraying, there's Google #1 and Google #2 in that picture. Yes, Stephen Nicholson and Iro, masters of spraying. And just a shout out to our gang. Our chief forester and many of our past chief foresters have really supported forest health and tried to do the right thing. And Shane Berg, who I'm pointing at there, is our current chief forester. And he devotes, and these are really, really busy people, devotes a full 2 days minimum for us to drag them around in the field, show them what matters, try to pound it into, and of course this is a young pine stand. And then our colleagues, the kind of Amber Arrow, it's a relatively new position. Jeannie Roberts, she's the director of bark beetle response, which is a new position, and the rest are pointing at a lot of new entomologists. Then we even let pathologists come out. And then we had some other district and licensees. So we go on lots of field trips and just more happy faces and workers. And oh, there's some WFIWC colleagues. You see, WFIWC attendees are always happy and smiling. And yay, Barb, we'll see you up here next year. And of course, in conclusion, forest entomologists are absolutely the best if you haven't figured that one out yet. And so I would just say, follow your passion, pick your favorite insect. If you have to, you can have 2 or 3, and you'll do well. So in case you might have seen a dog or 2 sneak into my side seat, I was going to explode right then. Tucker Bear, who's son of Tucker, Buddy, and Seamus, and John Gordon. Thank you.